Welcome everybody to Linux Academy. My name is Terry, and over this course we will be covering all things Linux, introduction to installation and setup. Okay everybody, so today's lesson is a brief history of Linux. We're going to talk about how Linux got its start, some of the key milestones of Linux, and some of the points that we will cover in subsequent videos. So when we look at the beginning of Linux, in 1991, Linus Torvalds, who happened to be a student at the University of Helsinki in Finland, he started development on a free operating system kernel. That's an important point because at the time he was simply developing the kernel, and we'll talk a little bit more about what a kernel is, but basically it's the brains of the operating system. It handles memory, paging, file system access, file system writing, etc. What he did is back in 1991 there was a Unix variant or a small business clone called Minix or Minix. He used that as the inspiration for developing a free version so that students had something to use that wasn't going to cost them any money. He developed it mainly because he was a struggling student, as most students are, and didn't have the resources to purchase a license for Minix, and it was difficult to get time on the university mainframe. After a couple of months of developing this kernel, he made an announcement on Usenet, and his Usenet post is right here. Hello everybody out there using Minix. I'm doing a free operating system. At the time he stated it was just a hobby and won't be big and professional like GNU or GNU, which was a Unix-like set of utilities. And at the time he wrote it for the 386 or 486 AT clones. He had been working on it since April, and he wanted some suggestions on any file system layouts or any utilities that he might port to the operating system. He started out by porting Bash, which happened to be the command line shell, and GCC, which was used for compiling other applications. So it was important to port GCC so that he could use GCC, which used C and C++, to compile other applications and utilities to work with his kernel. And he wanted suggestions to implement in his new kernel, but he didn't promise to implement anything. He only had a 386 and an AT hard disk, which for the youngsters amongst us is not a very powerful processor, one of Intel's first. It didn't even have a numeric coprocessor on it, so number crunching tended to be very, very slow. An AT hard disk was a 40-pin plugged directly into your motherboard, cabled, very slow in the 80 or 90 millisecond response time speed, but that was all that he had at the time. He fully intended this to be a project for him during college, and he would release it to the community. At the time, he originally published it under its own license, and he specifically restricted commercial use of the kernel. Once he paired it with software from the GNU project, the utilities and the kernel kind of morphed into its own animal, and he preferred the copyleft licensing agreement. Now, copyleft licensing agreement was developed by GNU so that all applications or programs that were developed under this license made the program free as well as the source code, and it had to be distributed with that application anytime it was used or modified or extended, and all of those changes also had to be distributed with the software for free. You couldn't derive something from the free software without then releasing the changes or extensions that you made. So he specifically used the copyleft model to go with GNU since his kernel and GNU seem to start going hand in hand. And GNU states that proprietary software developers use copyright to take away user freedom. We use copyright to guarantee their freedom. That's why we reverse the name, changing copyright into copyleft. Why the penguin? Whenever you're talking about Linux, it goes hand in hand with Tux the penguin. In 1996, they were trying to develop a mascot for Linux. And when they were meeting in 1996, Linus happens to mention that during a trip to the National Zoo and Aquarium in Australia, he was bitten by a little penguin. Seemed like a pretty natural fit, and the name Tux was simply born as a derivative of his name in Unix, Torvalds Linux. Here are some of the key milestones in the timeline for Linux. In 1991, that first kernel was released. In 92, the GPL GNU license was adopted. And finally, in 1994, kernel 1.0 was released, and Red Hat and SUSE released version 1 of their distributions. 96, kernel 2 was released and was multiprocessor capable, so it was server enabled. In 98, IBM Compaq and Oracle announced Linux support, and on 99, GNOME started to be developed as a replacement to KDE, which was using a proprietary and at the time for-pay Qt library. In 2004, X386, which was the GUI that was running on top of Linux, forked and joined the standards body, creating the Xorg Foundation, which we use today. In 2006, Oracle offers its Oracle Unbreakable Linux, which is based on the Red Hat distribution. 2007, Dell was the first major computer manufacturer to offer Ubuntu Linux pre-installed. And recently, in 2011, kernel 3.0 was released. We are, in 2013, getting ready to move kernel 3.9 to the stable branch, so kernel 4.0 can't be far off. Where does that leave us? Today, we have a large number of Linux distributions, and we'll talk about that next. Many of the distributions and brands you've seen, Arch Linux, Debian, Red Hat, Puppy, Ubuntu, FreeBSD, Scientific, OpenSUSE, and I can go on and on. There's more than 160 of them. Any and all of these distributions can be installed on any server or on any desktop for free at this time. Companies that offer these distributions offer support for pay, but all of the operating system, its code, and libraries have to be distributed for free. We'll talk about distributions next. My name is Terry for Linux Academy, brought to you by Pinehead TV.